From Cornwall to Birmingham and Johnston and Bexhill, here's Ruben Spar on the radio.
Hello to Little Law. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for letting me chat to you today. So can you tell me, how long have you been being a singer-songwriter for?
I guess not that long, really. I have been a singer for a very long time. I was a singer as a child and a teenager, and all through my adulthood. But I started writing songs about 10 years ago. I was in a duo called Duffy and Bird, and I wrote songs for that. And then in the pandemic, when we couldn't get together anymore because we lived in different cities, I decided to start writing for my solo project, Little Law. So Little Law has only been around for since 2020. So although I've been writing for the best part of a decade, I've only been writing like for my own project for the last few years.
So was it like going, I'm guessing you went to the studio with a duo, did you? Or is it your first time?
Yeah. I recorded with the duo. We released an album in 2017 and an EP in 2019. And then in 2020, I released the first Little Law EP. And then just earlier on this year, a few months ago, we released part 1 of 7 Stories, which is my second EP. And then the second part of that is coming out in February next year. So, yeah. But the first time I ever recorded, though, was in Nashville. I recorded 3 songs for the duo, although the other half of the duo wasn't there. I was there on my own, but they were duo songs and they did end up on the record with a session guitarist. With a friend of mine, actually, who I'd worked with on cruise ships about, 20 years previously. And I knew that he lived in Nashville and I was really desperate to come to Nashville. And so I rang him up and I said, do you think I could record something? He was like, of course, just come on in. He's an amazing pianist and engineer and producer. And he was like, let's just make it happen. Let's do it. So that was my first experience with recording. It was actually in Nashville.
In Nashville. So what was that like going to Nashville to record in Nashville?
It's amazing. I've been to Nashville 3 times and I'm going again next year. I'm a songwriter, as you know, so although I have my artist project, Little Law, I also write with other people and I write for TV and film as well. So for me, Nashville is kind of like a place that I orientate towards, I guess, professionally anyway. So I was sort of starting to build quite a few friends over there, although, it's a little bit of a closed shop, Nashville, but starting to kind of, edge my way in there. So it's a good place for me to go as often as I possibly can. I try and get over there once a year. I think in the future, I might end up going a couple of times a year for a bit longer. But at the moment, once a year. But it's a really fun city. Live music all day, every day.
So can you tell me more about your first EP that really is called Little Law?
Sure. I had this idea that I wanted to go solo, and I collected a bunch of songs that of what I'm quite a prolific writer. I write quite regularly. I write sort of weekly at least, and sometimes 3 or 4 songs a week. So as a result, I get a big batch of material. Sometimes I'm writing for other briefs and for other purposes, or I'm writing with other artists. Obviously, they're not for Little Law. If I write something that I think is a Little Law song, I'll sort of put it in a little repository. And I work with the same producer always for Little Law projects, a guy called Ollie Deacon, who goes by the name of Low Pines. So he really is kind of half of Little Law as well. And so I usually would consult him and say, right, here's my batch of songs. I think I gave him, 11 or 12 to choose from. And we originally agreed on 5 songs to record, and then there was one other one that he just really liked, and so he said, I think I'll push you to do 6. So we did the 6 songs. And it feels like quite a long time ago now. But there are a couple of songs that I think, I'm really proud of all the work actually, but there are a couple of songs that are sort of stand out. Stars is a song that people just seem to gravitate back to and really enjoy. It has a couple of 6/8 songs in there, so it's a little bit different from sort of just typical 4/4 and quite proud of the Americana sound. it was well received. I had some really, really good feedback from that record. But obviously, once you leave a band or the duo, as I was in, you have to start again with kind of putting your name out there and what have you. So it's taken a little while to pick up from there.
So how did Little Law come about?
Well, because the duo finished and I had to think of a way to carry on, basically, it's as simple as that. So Al, who was my partner in Duffy and Bird, didn't want to do it anymore. And so I sort of had a choice of either I got to try and find another band to join or I try and do something on my own. But it was a pandemic, it was 2020, so we were still sort of stuck in our homes, not going anywhere. So I didn't really have much choice but to kind of find a way to do something by myself. And actually, Ollie, who is my producer I just mentioned, I can remember saying to him, look, now that there's a pandemic, he lives in New York, and I've known him for a very long time. He's a good friend of mine. I said, now it's a pandemic and no one can be in person with you. Is there any reason why we can't work together since you're working remotely with everybody? And he was like, no, good point. Let's do something. What do you want to do? So yeah, I just approached him and he was really happy to work with me. And so we just started collaborating. As I say, I sort of had this batch of songs I started creating for Little Law's voice. And the sort of premise of the reason why I call myself Little Law, my real name's Trisha, is because I feel like the songs that I write are little short distilled stories. So they're little laws or folklores, if you like. A law being a story. So that's how the name originated. And that's another reason why this second batch is called 7 Stories. Each song in its own right is like a little distilled story in itself. It's encapsulated this sort of like little part of a tale.
So can you tell me more about Shallow?
I wrote Shallow. That was a single that came out after the EP. Yeah. So that song was really inspired by it was inspired by politicians letting us down, Boris Johnson. It was inspired by, the guy, Philip Green, who is the CEO of BHS. It was inspired by him, basically. And I was thinking, it was the pandemic when I wrote it as well. And so there's a line in there when I talk about you fed us lies with dinner. And I was thinking about watching, every day there would be that sort of 6 o'clock news broadcast. That's what that refers to. You fed us lies for dinner. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of like hatred of men in positions of power in that song. Kind of sounds like a broken heart song, but actually the origination of it was very much just reflecting the circumstances that we had at the moment with so many men in just very, very powerful positions letting us down.
So can you tell me more about Brown Liquor John?
I can. So I went to Nashville in the second time I went in 2019, just before, it must have been, was it 2019? No, it must have been 20. When was it? Or maybe it was 20. No, it must have been before that. Maybe it was 2017. I went there the second time. And I met up with a songwriter friend of mine, a guy called Chris. We did a co-write. We were really lucky. We were given access to an amazing studio, Ocean Studios, where we were working in one of the studio rooms where there's a proper piano and everything like that, because he's a piano player and I'm a guitar player. So we were writing all day and we didn't really kind of hit the jackpot. That's kind of how these things go. Sometimes you win some, you lose some. But afterwards, we went to a jazz bar and I remember going in there and him saying to me, what do you want to drink? And I said, I'll have a dark rum on the rocks. And he was like, oh, drinking brown liquor. We don't have, girls around here don't drink brown liquor. I was like, well, I do. And then he went on to tell me that he has a friend whose nickname is Brown Liquor John because he always drinks brown liquor. And so and it was the day before I was leaving. So the next day I was on the flight and I was sort of sitting there actually probably just waiting to take off. And I thought to myself, do you know what? We might not have had a great day yesterday writing, but there's definitely a song called Brown Liquor John. So on the flight, I just started. I mean, I didn't know the friend. Obviously, I had no idea about his backstory or things. There's nothing to. I should say the poor demise of Brown Liquor John in my story has nothing to do with the real Brown Liquor John, who's alive and well. But I just started to write prose of a story of this guy, a guy who has everything except happiness, basically, and he drinks his sorrows away. And yeah, I wrote a load of prose. I wrote just loads and loads and loads and loads of backstory, and then over the following few weeks, that song emerged. And actually, at the time, I was still in the duo, and I can remember giving it to Al and saying, you know, what do you think of this? I was really proud of it. And he was like, no, I don't think it's the duo sound. I'm not sure. So I just thought, okay, fair enough. Because obviously our songs for the duo had to feel that both of us would be happy with them. So I left it to one side. And it was only when I started working with Ollie, and I hadn't even mentioned it to Ollie that we did the first batch when we recorded Little Law, then we did Shallow. And then when I was saying, right, I want to do 3 more singles, so I produced Brown Liquor John, Birds and Normal at the same time. I said to Ollie, can I play you this song? We were actually face to face at the time. He was he was in the UK. And I played it to him and he was like, it's absolutely great. Why haven't you done this one? Why don't you give me this one in the first batch, you know? He's like, don't hesitate. Don't lose confidence. I'd lost confidence over it, sort of. So it sat for a long time. It was like, yeah, years I'd sat on it and didn't do anything with it. But it just wouldn't get out of my head. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't quite let it go. So yeah, so it came back. All the good songs never go. They always keep going. Remember me.
keep on nagging you to be released.
Exactly. Yeah.
So can you tell me more about Birds?
Birds I wrote when I was down in I was staying at a friend's house in near Fareham in Hampshire on the south coast. I was cat sitting for them, and I'd sort of been challenging myself to write in different ways. So I tend to be a lyrics first kind of person. So I'll start with prose, or I'll, you know, start with a lyrical premise. But I'd been challenging myself, really stimulated by a friend of mine who was saying you need to kind of mix up the way you write songs to write from different sort of means. And so I was starting with a chord structure and writing with a load of sus chords. It's got a lot of suspended fourths in the harmonies. And so I was just messing around with the chords and literally started singing what I saw as a way into it. The black cat was purring. So the cat is a Manx cat, so a tailless cat, and this gorgeous cat. Black cat purring, birds in the trees, boats sail by on a river of peace. That's what exactly I could see in front of me, because the house where I was staying had this little window onto the river right at the end of their garden, through a little gap in the trees. And so, yeah, so that's how it began. And, you know, I was going through some tough personal stuff at the time. So that did come into it as well. But yeah, the whole thing really was a situational song. I'm really proud of that one. I think it's a really, I'm very proud of the melody. And so it was just really great for me to sort of try a new way into songwriting, starting with the harmony rather than the chords rather than the words.
So continue more about Normal.
I wrote Normal when I had COVID and I was stuck in my bedroom with the door shut. We were supposed to be going on holiday the following week. And so I got COVID, but my family could not get it. So they were just hoping that I would be well enough to travel. And under no circumstances could they get it, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to travel. And so they literally locked me in my bedroom, not physically locked. I could leave, you know, to go to the toilet. But I was locked in my room and having food brought up to me, leave on a tray, knock, knock, and then take the tray and then leave. I was like being in prison. And I was pretty angry with somebody at the time while all of this was happening. And I was just sort of like, I've got nothing else to do. I mean, I'd watched 14 box sets probably by this stage, nothing else to do. I had a guitar in there. I have a bedroom guitar. Doesn't everyone have a bedroom guitar? Have a bedroom guitar. So I had my bedroom guitar, and I must admit it sort of flowed at me really, really quickly. I originally wrote it with a person's name instead of the you. And I gave it to Ollie and he was like, this is a great song, but you've got to depersonalize it. You've got to take the person's name out because it's not very relatable, is it? And then it became what it is now. But that's probably people's favorite song. It's a song where even if you've never heard it before, you can sing along to it. Sometimes I play it in bars or something and people will start dancing and singing back to me and I'm like, I didn't even know this, they've never heard it before, and yet they're singing along, which I find like some sort of miracle when that happens.
Do you get enjoyment out of people singing along to your music?
Oh God, yeah, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
So can you tell me more about Seven Stories Part 1?
Yeah, so there's 4 songs on Seven Stories Part 1. The first one's called Running on Empty, and it's a story written from the perspective of planet Earth about how she feels about humans and what they're doing to her with climate change. So the lyrics start, I hold you gently while you destroy me, running on empty, I love you anyway. Because the planet does need human intervention. It survives much better with our interventions, but not to the extent that we've done in terms of, taking fossil fuels and pushing them up into the atmosphere. And I wrote a lot of prose. I wrote letters pretending that I was Mother Earth writing to humans. So again, that sounds a bit like a love song, but it has a really different meaning underneath it. That was what was underpinning the song. The second song on the record is called Sebastian Says, and that is an imposter syndrome song. So Sebastian says I'm a little too little and a little too much, but still not enough. That's the sort of inner critic voice that I have telling me that, my harebrained schemes are childish and that I shouldn't do this and that I'm too fat and a doormat and selfish and an egotist and, all of these different things. So I, as a way to cope with that, I've named the inner critic Sebastian. So that was my way of getting back at him and telling him to back off. Their third song is called Stolen Glances, which is a song that I wrote actually as the lyrics start, on a train facing backwards, I steal glances. I actually wrote that song from a prompt. So for over a year, I wrote the Song a Week Challenge, which is run out of Nashville by an amazing man called James Tristan Redding, who he puts a prompt up every single week and then just invites anybody to write to it. So for a while, I was writing the prompt plus other writes as well. So I made myself as a minimum write a minimum of 1 song a week. So that particular week, the prompt was Stolen Glances. And I was on a train facing backwards. I do a lot of that. You see where I went with that? With a friend actually who was working. She was on a Zoom call for work. And I thought, well, I've got to write this song. It was about, I don't know, I was on the way back and the deadline was that evening because you have to finish the song by Saturday. And it was Saturday afternoon. We were on the train coming back from Cornwall. We'd been in Cornwall for a week. And I just, started writing on a train facing backwards, I steal glances. And then the whole thing really flowed from there. Although I say it flowed from there, if you go on YouTube and look up the original version of Stolen Glances, it's quite different. I changed it quite a lot lyrically, which is quite often the case with songs. They sort of percolate and then they evolve. Because I wanted it to have this sort of sense of reflection, but not necessarily be a sort of broken heart love song. I don't think that's always necessary. I think there's enough love songs out there and broken heart songs. So I sort of made it a little bit more ambiguous, a little bit more sort of opaque. And then the last song is a song called The Bench, which I wrote in Cornwall, actually, another time. Really inspired by a couple of different things. The first thing was the benches that line the seafront, where there's plaques on the benches, and you may notice in the lyrics that at some point it says she sits on the bench with the sea view and a plaque that reads, "He loved this place too. The dates engraved too close together, inscribed when he said goodbye forever." So that really is the sort of encapsulating that sense of the memorial bench, which is obviously a worldwide phenomenon. But also inspired by a friend of mine, a true story of a friend of mine who was with a man when she was much younger, and he was older than her, and they broke up. He left her, and she was absolutely devastated, but she always loved him. And some, good 10 or so years later, they ended up getting back together again, and they got married, and they were absolutely deliriously happy. She completely adored him, and then sadly he died. So the sort of the twist of the story is, she loved him once, she loved him twice, but the gods didn't feel like playing nice. So yeah, he unfortunately left her the second time, but permanently.
Okay, tell me more about this Seven Stories Part 2, which is on the 23rd of February.
So there's 3 songs. The first one's called The Jackal. I originally wrote that actually for a TV sync brief for crime show, Americana Crime, the brief was. But when I finished it, I liked it so much, I decided to keep it for myself. And I spent some time research. I was looking for a sort of, when I got the brief to write for this this Americana Crime brief, I was looking for sort of metaphorical objects or animals or something that I could use as a way into the song, and I sort of started reading up about the mythology around the jackal. And there's a lot of mythology in both Egyptian, the stories of the Egyptian gods, and also in African mythology around the jackal, about how cunning and wily they are. And also they have a black patch of fur across their back, and the myth goes that they tried to carry the sun on their back, and that scorched their fur. And there was a big, strong myth around in Egyptian mythology that said that if you saw a jackal, then somebody close to you was going to die. They were sort of like the purveyors of death. So that's how I kind of started the song. Just collating those kind of stories and trying to kind of come up with a lyric that way, and just taking inspiration from sort of that kind of quite dark, almost sort of Johnny Cash type vibe, but with a female vocal to get a bit of sort of like juxtaposition in there. So that's how that one came about. And as I said, I just really liked it, so I decided to release it. And then the second song is Little Pieces. So that song was actually a brief. I'm doing a master's in songwriting, and that was a brief from my master's to write a song called Little Pieces with a 1-4-5 chord structure. That was the brief, which is the sort of thing that these lecturers will give us as a brief at music school. And so I just started mind mapping the word little pieces and thinking about kind of circumstances where little pieces is relevant. And, for whatever reason, I landed on the idea of little pieces of food, and thinking about who eats their food in little pieces, and the infirm, people in care homes eat their food in little pieces. And actually in that environment, which unfortunately people close to me, their family is in that situation where they have no control over their choices each day, and how their food, what their food is, how it arrives, is nothing that they can do anything about. They just get what they're given, and they might be completely mentally sane, but their body is let them down. And so I just felt that was a story that I wanted to tell. When I originally wrote the song, I didn't know that I would release it. Actually, I felt like maybe it was a bit dark, and I should just write it for the sake of writing it, as I reject a lot of songs as I go through. But when I played it to Ollie, he just had a real strong faith in it as a sort of piece of art, I suppose. If you think about some of the work that the likes of Nick Cave has done, or Tom Waits, or where they really push the boundaries and speak from a character's point of view that's so obviously different from their own, and so his faith in it gave me a bit of confidence. And I mean the arrangement, as you will have heard, is kind of loony. It's really unusual, but I decided just to be brave and go with that one. And then the last song is a song called It Would Be Easier to Miss You If You Died, which I co-wrote with a friend of mine called Tiago Trosso, who's an amazing songwriter. He's just a superb songwriter. And when it's common when you go into a co-write situation to bring a list of writable ideas. So if you meet with somebody for co-write, you'll sort of both get your book out and go, right, what have you got? I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this. These are a list of titles. I had an idea about that. And he came here actually to my house on the day of the King's coronation, and we both wore tiaras. This was the circumstance. And I said, I've had an idea about ghosting, about writing a song called It Would Be Easier to Miss You If You Died. I mean, I'd already rattled off 4 or 5 at that stage, and he was like, we've got to write that one. Let's definitely write that one. So he just felt really enthusiastic about it. And that's kind of a bit of an unusual song as well. It doesn't follow a normal structure. Starts with a half chorus, then goes into the verse. But it's sort of both terribly sad and also a little bit funny and wry. So yeah, I'm quite proud of it.
So can you tell me how's independent artist for you?
It's great. I mean, I don't have a desire to be signed because I'm a songwriter. So my career is set up in a sort of, I have 4 quadrants to what I do. First is I have my artist project. I have Little Law. The second thing I do is I write for TV and film with a producer in Northern Ireland. I work for a library called NKP. The third thing that I do is I work with other artists. That's a little bit of a slower game, but it's just what I feel is that my Little Law project allows me to have true artistry and true creativity because I don't have any pressure from a record company to meet certain numbers or targets. So it's quite liberating, and that's really important to me that I retain that, which is why I'm very proud to be an independent artist. The TV and the sync keeps me fast, sharp. I've got to write to brief. You meet a lot of people because you end up in co-write situations. I've got a fantastic producer that I work with who's amazing. That in of itself feeds the writing with other artists because inevitably through those co-writes you meet different people, and if you're good to have in the room and people like working with you, they see that you have skills perhaps that they could do within their team, and so they invite you in, and so that starts to grow. And working with other artists also keeps you really fresh. It kind of really inspires you because there's a lot of best practice that you can learn from other people where they have different strengths from your own. And then the fourth thing that I do is I do community projects, which I mentioned to you before we started the interview, that I've just spent 4 days as a songwriter in residence with an artist community on a tiny little island in the Grand Union Canal, where I just went and I wrote for 4 days and I interviewed the local people and looked at the community and I used a sort of internal self-looking methodology to see about my own relationship. I thought that when I went on did the residency I would be writing about the artist, but actually I became more and more engaged with the river and with the canal and my own relationship with water. So that's led me to write a collection of stories around the river stories or water stories, canal stories. And I've just I'm just working on the demos now, and I'll hopefully be in a position to release that, I don't know, towards the end of next year, maybe flip it into 2025, but I think probably the end of next year because it'll be burning a hole in my pocket by then. I won't be able to hold on to it. But the great thing about doing those kind of projects is then that feeds Little Law. So you can sort of see I've got this sort of like continuous circle of like Little Law, you can be truly creative. There's no one to answer to. You're not going to be constricted by commercial success. TV delivers me an income. The writing with other people is my holy grail. I love doing that and it's really inspiring. The community projects keeps me fresh and asks me to think about things differently, which feeds Little Law, and so it goes on and on and on and on and on. That's the plan anyway.
Thank you for letting me chat to you today.
It's such a pleasure.
And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. I will.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.